Welcome to this tutorial series on budgeting and Excel reporting. In this series, we show you step by step how to build your own budget model. Excel reporting is a lean CPM platform for reporting, budgeting, and consolidation, and it helps make your financial planning simpler, faster, and more consistent. This video series consists of 3 videos. In the first video, we built the budget structure of the model. We'll look at report queries, selections, calculated fields, and how to convert data into a model structure. Once that structure is in place, we make the model interactive using calculations and cell editors. Then we show how to create safe queries. And in the third video, we add the finishing touches with cell styles, hide unnecessary rows and columns, and add visuals such as charts and icon. In this first video, we start with the foundation. We'll prepare the structure that you need for a budget model. A good budget model starts with a clear structure. In Excel reporting, this structure is based on dimensions, such as the general ledger accounts, companies, cost centers, and periods, such as a budget year. Together, these dimensions form the basis of your budget model. In this video, we're going to recreate a profit and loss planner. This is a widely used model that can work as a standalone planner in your budgeting cycle. But it can also be used alongside other planners when you want to add more detail to the process. A profit and loss planner typically contains a general ledger structure, information from last year, information from the current budget, and the ability to enter and plan new figures. It also performs calculations and later shows spark lines, so you can see how values are distributed over the year. And of course, we'll make it interactive, so the figures are stored in the database, available in reporting and reusable in the next budgeting cycle. So how do we begin? First, we go to the New button. With New, you can create a new object, such as a dataset, import, report, or model. For this tutorial, we're going to create a new model. We give the model a name, and then we enter the define mode of the model. On the back end, it looks very much like a spreadsheet, with rows, columns, and a formula bar, and a toolbar with all the tools you need. So this is the workspace where we build the structure of the model. To retrieve information from a dataset, we use a query. A query is a way to retrieve data from a dataset based on selected fields and filters. So we go to Define and add a new query. We give the query a name, which you can choose freely. Then we decide what type of query we want to create. There are 3 types of queries: a report, a data list, and an import. A report query displays the result directly in the model. That is what we want to do first. A data list can be used for lookup tables, for example, a list of rates. And an import query is used to make the model interactive. We'll cover that in a later video. For now, we want to display a report structure. We want that report to use financial data combined with our chart of accounts structure. In this tenant, our financial data is stored in the dataset balances. These are all datasets that can be selected and used in queries. We use balances because it is a main dataset that is linked to other datasets. There are also several options you can define for the query. For example, insert data rows. This automatically inserts rows for all records returned by the query. That means the model grows based on the data. Repeat grouped values repeats grouped values on each row. I'll leave that off for now. Insert data columns works the same way as data rows, but for columns. And the last option allows totals to also include extra calculated columns that you add beside the original query columns. So if you have a query with 5 columns and you add columns 6 and 7 for calculations, this option makes sure that the totals are also calculated for those extra columns. Once that is set, I click Apply and I enter the report query definition. This is similar to what you see when building a pivot-style report. One advantage of choosing a dataset like balances is that you also get access to all related datasets. So balances is linked to the charge of accounts, to companies, and also to tracking 1 and tracking 2. Those last two are often used for projects or cost centers. The benefit is that all linked fields can be used in your query. You can display them, calculate with them, or filter on them. That makes this approach very powerful. Now, which fields do we actually need? At the moment, we see a long list of available fields. That is a bit too much for this example, so I'm going to remove the ones that are not relevant right now. For example, I remove tracking 1 and tracking 2, because in this demo we are not working with cost centers or projects. For the chart of account structure, I want to keep the account group, and I also want to show the account name. For companies, I remove almost everything, except the company name and source, which I may still use later. And for balances, the most important fields for now are amount, source, and company. So now we have a clean list of fields that we can use in the query. At this stage, the query still does not do much. If I display the fields as they are now, I would get too much data back. So the next step is to apply filters. This step is really about reducing the field lists to only what we need. That keeps the query clear and makes the model easier to build. If we leave too many fields in place, we make the query unnecessarily complex, and we may also return information that is not relevant to this planner. So here, I deselect fields that do not apply to this demo, especially fields related to cost centers or project. That way, we focus only on the dimensions that matter for this profit and loss planner. In this case, that means the chart of account structure, the company, the period, and the amount fields. So after this cleanup, we are ready to find the actual selection logic. The first filter I want to add is for the company. That way, the user gets a selection field and can choose which company to work with. I do that with the select function. Select has several parameters, all of which are documented in the support center. In this case, I want the company selection to be required and to allow only a single value. So I choose the option for a required single selection field. Once I do that, the query will retrieve information for the selected company only. That already helps narrow down the result. But I don't just want to retrieve data by company. I also want to retrieve actuals from last year and the current budget for the selected year. That means I also need a period selection. For the year filter, we use the SELECTPERIOD function. SELECTPERIOD is a function that creates a period selection, for example on year level. It allows the user to choose a reporting period, and then the query retrieves data that matches that selected period. Here, I want to work with a year selection, so I add the parameter year. Field names can also be renamed. In the first column, you see the technical dataset field name. So here, I have the balances period field. But because this becomes a user-facing selection field, I rename it into something simpler. Year. That makes it clearer for the end user. Now, if I continue like this, the query will retrieve all information for the selected year and the selected company. But that is still not exactly what I want. I want to retrieve actuals from last year and current budget figures for the selected year. So now we need another function to build that logic. For that, we use the PERIODSUM function. PERIODSUM works together with SELECTPERIOD. It allows me to retrieve values based on the selected period, but adjusted according to a period parameter. In this case, I want to retrieve actuals from last year. So if the selected year is 2025, then PERIODSUM should retrieve the actuals for 2024. The field I want to retrieve is the amount field. So I rename amount to actuals last year. And then I use PERIODSUM to calculate that value. Inside the function, I use the amount field from balances. And then I apply the period parameter for last year, full year. You don't need to memorize all these parameters. The support center and the AI assistant can help with that. The important point is this. PERIODSUM allows me to say, take the selected year, move 1 year back, and return the full year amount. That gives me the actuals for last year. Then I also want the current budget. That is easy to build by copying the field and renaming it current budget. Now the logic changes slightly. I do not want last year's budget. I want the budget that belongs to the selected year. So if the user selects 2025, I want budget 2025. If the user selects 2026, I want budget 2026. To do that, I make the version logic more flexible. Instead of hard coding a specific budget version, I use contains. That means look in the version field, and if it contains the word budget, then retrieve that amount. So now I have two calculation fields, one for actuals last year and one for the current budget. At this point, we are already much closer to the structure we need. There's still one more important filter to add. I only want to retrieve P&L figures because this is a profit and loss planner. I know that my account type field contains that information. This is just one example, and every tenant can be structured differently. So it is important to understand how your fields are set up and what values they contain. If you don't know that immediately, you can check the field content from within the formula screen. That allows you to inspect the field and see what kinds of values it contains. Here, I look at account type in the chart of accounts. I can see values for balance sheet account and also values for P&L accounts. So I apply another filter using contains again. This time, I tell the query to only include accounts where the account type contains P&L. That means the query now has three filters, one for the year, one for the company, and one that only keeps profit and loss accounts. That is enough for now, so I click Apply and I move on to the report layout. Now we enter the report layout. This is slightly different from a normal report. In the query layout, you do not work with filter sections, but you do work with rows, columns, and values. So now we define how the query should appear in the model. I drag account group to the rows area. And I also add account name. I want account name to have a subtotal as well. Then I add the values that I want to display next to it. Actuals last year and current budget. When I click Apply, the query is placed in the model, starting from the cell where my cursor is positioned. A query in the model always consists of three parts: a header row, a data row, and a total row. The header row is shown once. The data row is repeated for every row returned from the dataset, and the total row is used for the summary. The data row is especially important later on, because that is where we will add logic and calculations. That logic is then repeated for every record in the query. Now let's check whether the query returns data. I can use View to inspect the result on the query. That looks correct. So now let's preview and test the report. We have a profit and loss planner with a year selection and a company selection, but there are still a few things that I want to improve. What I notice first is that the company selection is not very user-friendly yet. At the moment, it only shows company codes, so I want to change that. I also noticed that the account display is still missing the general ledger account number. I want to improve that as well. So I go back to Edit this query. I do not need to change anything in the layout itself, but I do want to improve the company selection. Right now, it returns the company code because that is what we originally defined. We can extend the select function so that it shows company names instead. That uses the second parameter of select. So I go back to companies where I know the relevant fields are available. Then I change the parameter so that the user sees the company name, while the query still uses the company code as the underlying key value. That is important because the balances dataset stores the company code, not the display name. So we want a selection field that looks friendly to the user, but still uses the correct technical key in the query. There's one more thing I want to do here. I know that my company dataset also contains consolidation companies, and I do not want those to appear in the budgeting model. So I extend the select function further by adding a filter inside the selection. That way, I can exclude all companies where the source equals consolidation. So now, the user gets a selection field based on company names, filtered to only show real companies, not consolidation entities. That makes the selection a lot more practical for this use case. The second change I want to make is to improve how the account name is displayed. For that, I use the concat function. With concat, I can combine multiple values into a single display field. Here, I want to combine the account field with the account name. So first, I take the account code, then I add a space, and after that, I add the account name. In Excel reporting, you can reuse fields that were already defined in your define field step and use them again and convert the data. That makes it easy to build display fields without repeating the entire logic. So now I use concat to combine account, a space, and the data from the account name field. That already gives me a much clearer result. Let's apply it and see what it looks like. Now we have a company selection that shows company names while still using the correct key value underneath. And in the query result, we now also see the account display with more useful detail. But there's still one small improvement I want to make. In this setup, the account value contains both the company code and the account code. I only want to display the actual general ledger account code. To separate those two parts, I use the split function. Split takes a value and separates it based on a chosen delimiter. In this case, the delimiter is the underscore. That means the value is divided into two parts. The first part is the company code, and the second part is the account code. I want to use the second part only because that is the account code I need. So I apply split. Tell it to split on the underscore and return the second element. Once I apply that change and preview the results, we now have the full structure in place. We have a year selection, a company selection, a general ledger structure, actuals from last year, current budget for the selected year and only P&L figures. So the structure is now ready. But at this point, we still cannot budget yet because the model is not interactive. That is what I will show in the next video. So in this first video, we prepared the structure for a profit and loss planner in Excel reporting. We created a new model, added a query, defined the right fields, set up selections for company and year, used PERIODSUM to retrieve last year's actuals and current budget figures, filtered the query to P&L accounts only, and improved the display using concat and split. That gives us a solid structure as the basis for the next step. In the next video, we will make the model interactive, so users can enter and plan budget figures directly. See you in the next video.